Huh, no way. Come on, really? Actually a pretty cool edit. You know, when I was a kid, I was obsessed about cars. Like, you would see me either playing Need for Speed and I would tune cars more than I was playing the game, or I was watching some kind of motorsports like rally or Formula One, or I would actually build small miniature cars. And at home I still have like a whole shelf with all the cars I built. I would throw away the manual just to make it more challenging for me, and I would enjoy it more than Lego. And I don't remember how I found out or got my hands on Photoshop, but I actually taught myself just by clicking and seeing what it does, because YouTube back then was just started, so there was no tutorials. I taught myself how to edit cars and tune them. I would just download wallpapers of stock cars and I would add wheels and bumpers and spoilers. The better I got, the more complicated things I was doing. And I would make photos like this. Incredible, really. That's how I learned Photoshop. You know, and the funny thing is that now, 15 years later, I decided I'm going to pursue my creative side, and I revived that feeling of creating art in Photoshop, but of course on a more advanced level. Here is an example of one of my projects. Really proud of this one. It took me around 10 or 15 hours to make this one. I love it, really. It's a more surreal, which is what I'm really into right now. It's all goes down back to these moments when I was sitting alone in my room for hours just editing photos. Incredible. And you know, working on these projects, I thought, you know what? For this video, I'm gonna share with you my 5 tips on how to better blend images in Photoshop. So let's get right into it. Tip number 1, and the most obvious one, choose or make the right photos. Now, I'm not joking when I say that 45% of my time is just me sitting there scrolling through photos, trying to find the right one. I'm pretty sure it has something to do also with my perfectionism and trying to make all the photos look as real as possible. But the fact is that when you find the right photos, it makes the whole editing process way much easier. And the better photos you find, the easier it is to edit. And there's 2 things that you need to consider here. You need to look at perspective, or the angle of your photo, and lighting. For the beginners out there, perspective is how the image is represented, or the object is represented in 3D space. So are we looking at it from the top, from the bottom, from the left, from the right? And of course there's various degrees in each one of them. And the lighting is how an object is lit up. Now, the interesting part is that there's so many people who actually overlook lighting. Like, they just take random photos, they put them in, and they hope that it's gonna work. And trust me, no matter how much editing you're gonna put into it, if the lighting does not work with the whole composition, forget it, it'll never work. Now, if you cannot find the exact photos that you need, don't worry, find the ones that are the closest as possible. And then in Photoshop, we can use some tools to actually change it to make it fit perfectly. So for example, for perspective, we can use perspective and also the transform tools. They allow you to move and shift the images in all sorts of ways. And then for lighting, what we can do is we can manually add some highlights and shadows. A good example of this is this bird in my image. So when I found it, it was just a daylight photo, but I really liked it and I liked the quality of it. So what I did was I added highlights. I brightened up the right side and I darkened the left side. And that allowed me to make or fake the idea as if the light is illuminating the bird. So you can use this for your object as well. Now, however, if you see really strong highlights coming in from a specific direction and you don't respect that in your composition as well, then it will not work, and even trying to fix that one will make it very difficult. The second tip I have for you guys is use masking. Now, around 80% of all my time I ever spent on Photoshop, I never use masking. I would just cut out images, that's it. And then I would sit there and wonder, why did I not cut out properly or spend more time actually cutting out it in a good way? Until I found out masking, and I realized it is an amazing tool. Essentially, what it allows you to do is to hide areas of your image that you don't need in a non-destructive way. So at any point in time in your edit, when you feel like you need to go back and to polish your image, you can always go to your mask and adjust it. It's incredible. And the second, and I think is a very also important point about masking, is the fact that it allows you to easily smoothen the edges of your image. Now, why is this important? Well, if you look at photos in general, no matter how sharp they are, you'll never really have exactly laser sharp edges. They just never are. They have at least a little bit of smoothness to them. And believe it or not, something as simple as sharp edges make your object feel out of place or kind of pop out in your eye compared to the general composition. So smoothing them out just a little bit or feathering them in can help you to make the photo look as if it's part of the whole composition. And speaking of smoothing out things, the third tip I have for you guys is always consider the depth of field. Generally speaking, in photography, the idea is that the further away an object is from your camera, the blurrier it becomes. Unless, of course, you have unlimited, I think it's called unlimited focus, where everything is in focus. But in general, you have a very depth of field when you're making your photos. And you need to respect that when you're adding images to your composition. It's also very important that what will make your images actually fit into your composition, with the smoothing borders, of course. My tip is, once you place your object, no matter how big or small it is, add Gaussian blur to it. You don't need to use a lot of it. So what you can do is you just zoom in if it's a small photo, or just keep it like it is when it's big, and just move the slider until you feel that the blurriness of your object matches the blurriness of other objects within your image, which is at the same level. However, if you don't have anything in your background, don't worry, just add some blur and adjust it according to your liking or your eyes. So basically kind of try to feel how much it is. In the beginning it might sound very difficult, but then as you go and you kind of practice more, you will get a sense of how much blurriness you should have in your image. Tip number 4 for you guys, use your image adjustments and your FX filters with smart objects. Now, for those of you who don't know or are beginners in Photoshop, image adjustments are your settings or tools that allow you to change the exposure, the color, and the saturation of those colors. Effects or the creative filters allow you to add blur, sharpen images, and also they have like artistic things inside their filters that you might like to use in your photos. Now, the problem in Photoshop is that when you're adding these image adjustments and these special effects to a layer, it adds it permanently, meaning that you cannot change it afterwards. If you're doing something very simple like adding an object or let's say birds to a sky, it's not a big deal, just quickly add it and you're done. But if you're doing something more complex, then most probably you will change the exposure and the color like 10,000 times until you get to your final result while you're editing and adding more information. So the problem here is that you will never remember exactly what settings you put in to every single of your layers, especially if you have like 100 of them. This is where smart objects really help out. A smart object, and the way I like to think of it, is basically outsourcing your original image to a new document. So as soon as you take your image and you transform it to a smart object, it creates a second file where your original is stored. And now in your composition, you're gonna have only a preview file, which you will not be able to edit. You can only basically preview it or add a mask or add some effects to it. Now, if you want to actually edit the image, for instance, delete something or add something to it, you have to double click on the layer and it'll open a second document where you can do it. And then once you save it, those changes will be reflected in your original file, your composition. Now, because Photoshop cannot permanently change the preview file because it's protected, when you're adding effects or these image adjustments, it actually just stacks them underneath as an effect. Which means that once we double click on it, we can actually see the settings and we can change them as many times as we want. And we can actually change the order of these effects whilst they're stacking, which just gives you all the flexibility that you need. It saves you time and it just makes everything so much easier. So I always advise you guys to change all your images to a smart object. It's the best thing ever. Tip number 5, use blending modes. Now, this tool was made in order to help you blend two images together. And this is achieved by either making the white, gray or black parts of your image transparent, or they also have like additional very creative kind of filters. The tricky part about using blending modes is that no one, even including the pros, cannot tell you exactly how the blending mode will affect an image. because it always affects an image differently. Like you can have even similar photos and the blending mode will affect it completely different in both cases. However, you have to know the general concept of how they work, and that can help you to blend images together. To demonstrate you blending modes, here I have this really cool Toyota Supra, and what I want to do is to add a picture of this wolf and make it seem as if it's part of the whole paint job of the car. So what I can do first is already transform it and place it in the position where I want to keep it, and I already created a mask just to clean up the areas that I don't want to be affected by the image. Now overall it looks good, however you can clearly see that this is an image and it does not work with the car. It just deletes the shape of the car. So what I can do is I can try to play with the opacity, but that doesn't work. It looks bad, it just grays out. So let's try blending modes. So if we cycle through the blending modes, each one of them gives a different effect. But surely there should be something that works the best. Now in my opinion, the linear light works the best, because not only is it really nice and rich black color, but we can also see through it and all the colors and the lights behind it. So when we look at it in general, it is more believable that it is part of the vinyl. Of course, this is a very simple and quick example. There's definitely, I would work on it a bit more to make it seem even more realistic. But nevertheless, if we even reduce a little bit the opacity, it would seem a little bit more believable rather than just applying a picture and then playing with the opacity. So yeah, quite a tricky tool. However, it is very helpful if you know how to use it. And if you guys want me to make a tutorial on this, do let me know in the comment section below. Now, actually, I have one bonus tip for you guys, and that is focus on the details. Make sure that no matter how big or small the object or image is going to be in your whole composition, you make sure that all the possible defects are eliminated. You don't need to be completely surgical about it, like me, but you need to make sure that everything that can throw off a person or take them out of the experience is eliminated. To demonstrate you the idea of details, let's take this image of a plant on a yellow background. Let's say that I want to replace the background with the blue color. So what I can do is I can first mask out the plant and then replace it with another color behind it. Now immediately you can see that the plant does not match or does not fit with the blue color of the wall. And the reason for this is because, as you can see, the highlights are yellow, which means that light comes in contact with the wall and then bounces off, giving a hue on the brighter parts of the plant. So to fix this, what we need to do is we need to select the layer of the plant and we need to change the highlights to the same color as the background. So let's open up our hue and saturation and let's move our hue all the way until our highlights become blue. And now immediately you can see that the plants fit nicely with the background because we apply the same principles as the original photo, whereby light comes in, comes in contact with the wall, bounces off, and then gives a blue hue on the highlights of the plant. Now, of course, the plant itself is also very blue, but that's because the original photo has the greens very desaturated, which is an artistic choice of the original creator. I hope this explanation makes sense when it comes to details, and it's especially important if you're going to be printing it or maybe showing it off on a big screen compared to, let's say, social media like Instagram, where anyways people take like 2 seconds to look at your photo. So make sure that everything is clean and nice and works together. It makes everything looks much more realistic and proper. And there you have it, my top 6 tips on how to blend images in Photoshop. I use them every single time in every of my project and it makes my life so much easier. And I hope it's gonna help you out as well. If you enjoyed this video, do drop a like. If you are a beginner like me trying to figure out photography, filmmaking, and you're learning without some kind of fancy courses, do consider subscribing if you like my content. Hit me up in the comment section below. We would love to speak to you guys and let us learn together. As always, thank you for watching and I see you in the next one. Пока!